It was massive confidence, courage, boldness. If you know that this is your divine path, why wouldn't you take it? And what are
Hmm.
you afraid of if you're being guided in this direction? What is there to be afraid of if you know you're being guided and this is what you're here to do?
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, guys, I like to take my time right here and honor our guests because they're coming with a couple of commodities in my mind that are very expensive. Time. 24 hours has been offered to every man and woman that has landed on this planet. What we do with our time will tell me a lot about you. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created the individual that is before me, and that individual is Cynthia. And in order for her to give us access to those things that her journey gave to her, which was wisdom, knowledge, insights, and those wonderful things that we want access to, she has to become vulnerable. So we want to honor her for that, allowing herself to be honorable. And so it is our intention to create a safe space so that she can be. Cynthia, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much, Ken. I am delighted to be here and get to share a little bit with your audience and have a conversation with you. So thank you for having me.
It is an honor to have you here. One of the questions that I love these simple questions that I love leveling at our guests as they come because I tell them the journey gives us two aspects. The first is the independent part of the journey where we get to learn who we are and we are engaged in learning about the self-love and all those wonderful things. And then there's the other aspect of the journey that the interdependent part which allows us to become servants. Cynthia, my question to you is, how do you serve mankind?
Boy, let's get started. Thank you. Well, part of my journey has included some significant pivots recently, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But currently, I started a nonprofit recently that is focused on raising consciousness, human consciousness, one person at a time. And then the proceeds for the nonprofit are all donated to charities that are working to end global warming, which is the most pressing crises of our time. And we have a lot of them, but that one is big. So that is one of the areas that I serve right now. And then I have a big message that I have been getting out through a couple of books, which I will share a little from during our conversation, I'm sure.
Definitely. I tell people this, Cynthia, that once you have located your assignment, because I believe personally that the journey is designed to make us aware and awaken us to what our assignments are. And the beautiful thing about the assignment, it changes as we are changed. And so it is a part of us as it morphs and synchronizes as we gain insight and develop more and so forth. Then our assignment has the ability to change because our assignment is what has been given to us to complete. And we know what that is as we identify it and we go from there. Another custom, I'll walk you through some of our customs. Cynthia. One of the customs, I call it to go back. I like going back to the beginning of our beginnings. And as individuals, we have a couple of spaces that we visit as we are walking through to become independent, if you will. And the first space that we visit for a short time, some of us 16, 18 years, or whatever, is that unit called family. Now, in this space right here, Cynthia, we're going to learn a couple of things. Our communication skills, we're going to start developing there. We're going to start developing our belief system there, which will start affecting our behavior. We're going to start having mindsets and all these different things that are inputted in us right there. What was your family unit like?
Well, it's interesting because I was an only child and I grew up in a middle class family in Virginia in the United States. And I thought it was a somewhat typical middle class life in a suburb of Washington, D.C. My father was retired military and a police officer. And what I didn't recognize until recently in my personal development journey,
Hmm.
I had a significant amount of emotional control and trauma in my childhood that I repressed. So, in talking about personal development, I know you talk about self love a lot. And in order to love ourselves, we need that comfort level in how we're raised.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of emotional trauma, and I didn't recognize because I became an I don't know if you'd call me an overachiever, but I really was a people pleaser, and specifically the authority figures in my life, wanting to please them. And so I was a very good student and a producer of, I would say, successful early on in my academic career and professional career, but I was always seeking that external proof that I was worthy. And I didn't recognize as my skills developed and I became very confident in how I was showing up in the world, I didn't recognize that I still did not have the self esteem or worthiness or self love, which is where it comes from, that I needed to step out and stop playing small. I was successful from a lot of people's lenses, but I was playing small because, we're comfortable with what we're comfortable with. And I just stayed with what I knew. What I'd like to share there that I also did not recognize is most of us in first world culture, most of us who were raised before the 90s grew up with a very authoritarian parenting style
Hmm.
that challenged us in having self love, even when it appeared to be a very loving family or was. The style of the parenting that was popular at the time or was all they knew did not imbue self love. So many of us did not recognize, and many still don't, that they were lacking in self love because we're confident, mature adults
Yeah.
showing up in the world. But we didn't have it at that deep level when it was being programmed into us, before the age of 8. So I just wanted to share that. I think folks who grew up later, the later generations from 1990 forward, parenting style shifted and it was easier for them to have that innate self love, even though we could say that parenting styles became overly permissive, it did instill more confidence and self love and worth in children in general. So that was my childhood experience, maybe more than you asked for, but I think it's relevant to our conversations around self love and finding and living our purpose, which is how I forget the word you used in the beginning, but how I refer to finding our path and what we're here to do,
Yeah.
being brave enough to step into that purpose. We really have to facilitate and nurture self love so that we have the self esteem and worth to step out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. When we suffer trauma, Cynthia, as a young individual, some of us, because of it, the intensity of, and again, it depends on the individual. So we handle it different ways. One of those is we pack it back in the memory, if you will. And that is done in order so that we can survive. The first stage of our trauma is basically a survival mode. And so some people have different ways of how they do that. But usually that trauma will produce a people pleaser, as you had mentioned, because I was the same. But then it branches off into the overachiever. You have those that are seeking that, then you have those that are hiding their voices, they keep quiet. So, but that trauma will cause that to happen, and we have to figure out, our young individual have to figure out a way. How am I going to manage this? How do I cope? And so we handle it with different way. But that people pleasing aspect usually is that root, the first root that happens, and then it branches out from there. As you said, it became overachievers. You have to now compensate for that based on what our situation is. And so, yeah, that first place is usually a tough place that we all have to face that. Now, how did you show up outside of family? We know that some of this is now, you're now identifying them as you're on your journey and so forth. You picked up a few things. But how did Cynthia showed up to her friends? What was her communication skills like when she was a young girl in high school and so forth? How was she outside of home?
Well, I would say in one respect, my people pleasing served me well in my future leadership roles because I was very diplomatic and I could morph between groups. You know how in
Hmm.
high school, especially, there's all these
Yeah.
groups and cliques and whatever, and I could kind of flow in between all of these people that didn't necessarily get along with each other because I was diplomatic and I would allow, people have their opinions and their perspectives. And I was open to all of that, but I also wouldn't speak up if I had a differing perspective because I didn't want to have the judgment and such. But it did serve me well as I stepped into more leadership roles beyond high school in my workplaces. It served me well because I could walk into any group and communicate and not inflate an issue. And I think that I had early on, because of the emotional trauma, developed emotional regulation, which some people struggle for years with and overreact to circumstances and such. I developed that very early on to be able to, repression isn't always a good thing, but in a work environment it is, to be able to not overreact, but to calmly respond to circumstances and allow people to calm down before we proceed and such. So it was very helpful to me. And I think my communication skills developed very early on because of that ability to converse with different people.
Yeah, that's the upside of people pleasing. The other side is people pleasing without boundaries. That's when the problem starts.
Right.
So as you're moving through life, as I call it, you just, life happens and you are at that crossroad, one of the very first crossroads that we as individuals visit as we're moving forward in our life. And that is educational system or work. We're trying to now decide college or work. Which route did you pick? But more importantly, if you pick college, which I know you did, what field of study did you pick and why did you pick that?
I'm just thinking about this for a minute. It's interesting because I wanted to be successful and there was never a choice because my mother was determined I would go to college. So it didn't occur to me to question that.
Hmm.
But originally, I had thought I would go the pre-med route and possibly get into being a doctor or something because I wanted to serve. I wanted to help people. That seemed like a very caring profession, and I was good in school, so I thought, well, I can do this. But I wasn't a fan of having to fail, I guess. I'm just going to say it. I had been a good student. And so I remember my first chemistry class, my freshman year, I had to work really hard and was not getting the grades, the A's that I was used to getting. And I said, I am not doing that. And I dropped chemistry, which sounds like a big failure. I quit, but I wasn't used to failure. And, that is a significant process to go through as someone who struggles with self love and self esteem, even though I didn't realize it at the time. I was used to achieving, and I could not handle possible failure, a less than admirable grade in one of those classes. So I stepped back and I really, really enjoyed psychology, and that's what I ended up studying. And I think it is a good basis for anything that we do in
Hmm.
life. Actually, I continually pull on psychology. So it worked out well, but it was, looking back, a lesson, if I'd known to look for it, about who I was at the time, not being able to understand that we have to fail to learn frequently, get that feedback and persist and keep going. It's such an important quality, but we don't necessarily teach our children that in school.
Hmm.
And especially if you're used to success or it's come easily, it's a lesson we have to learn, but I hadn't learned it
Yeah.
yet.
It is a paradox to the high achiever. And that high achiever, you can't, you're looking at that and you're seeing some shortcomings, if you will, and being a high achiever. That is a terrifying picture to look at that test and see that you weren't, even though you were working and studying, that it wasn't to that level that you perceive that you ought to be. And when
Right.
you're not there, fear walks in. All of the other things will walk in with you and begin to hug and hold on to you. And then you'll have to try and find a way. So here
Yeah.
you are. The
Yeah.
battle has begun, if you will. You're in psychology, and being in that field, as you said, this is studying human behavior, the mindsets, all of these wonderful things. Nietzsche and all the other boys, you're going to be studying all these wonderful guys out there, and you're bringing these guys into your space, into your knowledge, into your being. As you began to deposit all that rich data, Cynthia, how did that stuff begin to affect you? Because in that classroom, you have to look at you. They teach you that. So what was happening, Cynthia, as this was happening with you, with all this new knowledge coming in and you were excavating, it causes you to excavate some things and you start noticing things. What did it look like for you while you were going through that
Honestly,
study?
Ken, it did not have that effect on me. I was, I had not been taught or gotten to the place where I could be someone who loved learning.
Hmm.
I was a student who, I did enjoy the classes, but I wasn't applying it back to myself. I was
Yeah.
learning and I was studying for the tests
Hmm.
in all subjects, study for the test, get the good grade, move on. And honestly, college was a long time ago, so I can't say for sure that it had any effect at all on me. It was a good basis of understanding to move forward and into the workplace. And I've always said I ended up in the hospitality industry for quite a while. And I always said what a great background that was because I work with
Yeah.
people all day, every day, both staff, team, customers. It was a great background to have, but it was a long time ago and I was not in a place psychologically to do the self-reflection. This is
Hmm.
actually an important lesson that I recognized, I want to say recently. I probably really got serious on a self-development journey about 15 years ago. And I recognized that there were a lot of times in my professional journey that I could have reflected and learned and used that to do better in the next conversation. And I didn't take advantage of that because when you reflect, you have to have self love to be able to do that without really a lot of self flagellation. I'm not perfect. I mess that up. It's very hard and it's very common for people who suffer from a lack of self esteem to not want to reflect honestly because we know we're going to go there. We know we're going to beat ourselves up. I should have done better. I don't want to look at that.
Yeah.
I'll actually share a quick story about that that makes this just so obvious. I really enjoyed speaking in front of groups. I mean, I was a leader. I did a lot of public speaking and speaking in front of work groups and enjoyed it. But at one point, I decided whenever it was getting popular online that I needed to get in front of the camera and do videos. I was terrified. But truly, I couldn't make myself push the record button. And I realized after a while with this struggle, I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I can just delete the video if I
Yeah.
don't like it. Why am I struggling? And I love public speaking. Why am I struggling? Well, the problem was I had to go back and look at the video and critique myself. If you're
Hmm.
speaking in front of a group, you don't hear yourself afterwards unless it's recorded.
Yeah.
So I was more comfortable doing that, but I didn't want to have to see myself because I would self-critique.
Yeah. We all do
So
it.
this is a lesson that I was continuing to learn, and at that point, I realized I still had work to do. I did not have enough self-love.
Talk to us about that because that is, I tell people life happens. We live our life and we go through things. And then one day, just like any other day, we get up and we have our coffee or whatever routine we have. Life has a way to interrupt all of our normal patterns, if you will. Something happens in our life and causes us and sends us on this journey that we call personal development. What was it that caused you to take that break? Because all until then, we are living off of the default program that we have been programmed and told that this is how it should be. And then there's something happens at the end that causes us to hits us back a little, and then we began to question things. What was it that caused you to question things, if you will?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I meant to point this out when we were talking about self love originally. Because so many people, I mean, it's pervasive around the world, and so many people don't recognize it in themselves. So, a quick trick to test if you have enough, and this is how I discovered this, is to think about how you respond to new or different circumstances or opportunities that are outside of what we call our comfort zone. I was very confident showing up in leadership roles. And so it never occurred to me that I would have an issue still in this
Hmm.
area, or that I ever did. I'm not sure I explored it and recognized it earlier in life, but certainly not at this point. And then all of a sudden, I was presented with an opportunity to get out of my comfort zone, and I stopped. I was frozen in fear. And a lot of times we don't recognize fear as fear. It can show up as other types of resistance, like procrastination or analysis paralysis, or just missed appointments that were important for an opportunity. You just forget about them and don't show up. Resistance can show up in a lot of ways, but that hesitation to get out of your comfort zone, if you're recognizing it and it is harder than you feel like it should be to move through it, to take that initial step, there's definitely still self love work that you could do to help with that. So
But
that's
to
how
that,
I recognized it in myself. I just could not get out of my own way
yeah.
and take on this new role and being in front of a camera and having to see myself and critique myself because I didn't have enough self love.
So here you are, probably in your 30s, and you're looking at, for the first time, that you are made aware that you need to look at something very, very important in your life. What steps did you take to begin that quest to find out who you are and to begin that self love journey, if you will?
Well, I did what most people would do because I had no idea. I bought some books, I listened to some podcasts, I did some journaling. And, there are exercises you can do, and self reflection and self talk does help.
Hmm.
because you're convincing your subconscious that you deserve love, you love yourself. But the best thing I ever did that just took me to the next level and erased this as a need that I knew I had it was when I recognized my connection with source, with divinity. And this was my personal journey. And whatever you call that greater power, when you recognize and not just read it and understand it, but when you know it to be true, when you recognize that divinity is in you, that love and light is in you, and that divinity is there, your inner wisdom to guide you. How can you not love yourself if they do? And that was the final level that I needed, up leveling, if you will, that I needed to make. And that growth happened very recently. I was very well along in my years and decades of living before I had what's called a spiritual awakening. And that's just when you recognize the communication coming in. What many people call intuition
Hmm.
is frequently more than that, that guidance. When you recognize it, there you go.
Yeah, once
And that
you
did it
have
for
that
me.
encounter, it
Yeah.
changes everything.
Yes.
It shows you who you are, but the more powerful thing that happens is that it gives you hope and it changes you like that. And once you begin to see that, because I always try to educate my folks when I talk to them that you are so special that no one really stop and think about the uniqueness of themselves. And the fact, and I keep telling everyone that I look at myself, I've been looking at myself for many years as such, as an endangered species. I am one of a kind. This mold that was made in Ken Primus was destroyed when I was created. My fingerprint identifies to that. No one has my fingerprint. My voice has been identified to that, and no one has my same voice. My facial feature, we have industries that are based on our uniqueness, but no one tells us that we're in danger to just make us feel as if we're irreplaceable. No, man, you are so valuable. It's impossible to think that. But you have to come to that space where you're awakened as you did, but to the divinity that is within as well, but also that divinity that we can look and connect with to get our power, our security, so that we can then begin to become who we truly are. So here this woman is. She got this awakening. What did self-love look like, Cynthia? What did it look like to you? What did it manifest as?
Well, what it has manifested as, and again, it happened, that final step happened with my spiritual awakening and the crystal clear guidance I felt I was getting. It was massive confidence, courage, boldness, because if you know, and you talk about what I call purpose, if you know that this is your divine path, why wouldn't you take it? And what are
Hmm.
you afraid of if you're being guided in this direction? It doesn't mean we won't fail. I keep learning that. It means you'll keep learning and keep going because the path can be windy and bumps along the way as we learn. But what is there to be afraid of if you know you're being guided and this is what you're here to do? So the courage is beyond, I don't know if courage is the right word, just the conviction that, well, there's no question. This is what I'm here to do. This is what I'm going to do. And the pivots that I've made just from out of the blue, the books that I mentioned writing, I never wanted to be an author. I didn't think
Hmm.
I enjoyed writing, but all of it, it's just my whole thinking of where I'm going is on, well, this is my path now. I have conviction. This is what I'm going to do. The overthinking and analysis paralysis that we
Hmm.
can get into when our subconscious kicks in and says, wait a minute, you haven't done that before. None of that has bubbled up, let alone held me back since this happened. It is truly transformational when you have that level of knowing and conviction. And what I really like to share, and again, for those in your audience who really are not on a spiritual path, you can think of this as your intuition. A lot of people call it intuition, coming from the right side of your brain, your creative side. And they officially are two different things, but you can see them as the same, and they have the same benefits. When you lean into that inner knowing or intuition, life just gets so juicy because we are meant, yes, we need to work on ourselves, but that's because we need to have the confidence to live fully, and that is in service to others. Everyone's purpose is different because we are unique, as you said, Ken, but we are meant to be in service to others.
Hmm.
And to know how to fully do that and have the most impactful life, we need to tap into that inner knowing or follow our intuition, if you will. We need to tap into it and then have confidence or courage to step forward and do it and not just sit back and dream.
Yeah, one of the model is that I see out there. I'm 60, 62, 63. Uh, and the model that I've seen from studying all the books, the I Ching, the Bible, Vedas, all the things that I've read, that when one gets in touch with self, it is the foundation before one can be used as truly impactful servant. Why? Because when you get to see and learn about you, you're actually getting and see to learn about humans. And when you have been imprinted with your revelations that you get from your journey, as Cynthia puts it, that you find your purpose and you become purposeful. And when you're in that space, you move at a different rate and different energetic level. Things and testings will come. They should and will always come because that's how we grow. No one grows when nothing happens. When is the hard times is when we grow because we get a chance to see how great we are and how expansive we can move through things and how reliable our subconscious being, our psychology will call that the subconscious man, and then religion and spirituality will call him the soul, the spirit of the man. When we began to tap in from that realm, or I tell people there are libraries that are in what the psychologists will call the quantum realm. Religion will say the heavenly places. There are libraries there that we would have access to utilize and help us in our everyday thing. But we can't get there until we've gone through some stuff, introduce ourselves, find out who we are. But then it's usually through those hard times that we tap into the other library, and we can only access that by faith. Faith is that thing, that piece that causes you and I to step out and do things regardless of what people say or whatever we feel. We just know that this is the way, even though we don't see it. And then when we move, it's amazing how the other side meets us. Because I believe fate is easy, we just complicate it. It's just a decision for us to do something and it's there waiting for us, but we are held up because of fearfulness, procrastination, all the other things that we use to keep us from walking that journey. So here you are. You've been exposed, as they say, you've been awakened. And once awakened, the things that are deposited in you are going to be given birth. Talk to us about that first book, all these information that you're gathering in your journey as you're moving through. And then there comes a point in time that, your inner being, your guidance will say to you, I need you to write.
Mhm.
Talk to me
Yeah.
about that first experience because you said you don't like it, but here you were impressed upon to put those things within pages, if you will.
Well, I mentioned that my guidance is very clear, so it did make it easier than I would have imagined to write because the words come through me
Hmm.
from my inner wisdom. And the first book, actually, I wanted to share because the title is Hope for a New Era. I'd like to share the definition of hope that was given to me because we've talked a little bit about faith and hope. The way we have hope is by holding a vision, having faith in that vision, whatever it is. Maybe it's your belief in divinity, or maybe it's your belief that we can, as humans, create a better future. But you have that hope, you have that faith in a vision, and then you take action based on your guidance, your intuition. You take action to create it. And that leads to empowerment. People feel so disempowered right now because they're scared. They're stuck in our instinctual programs of a fear response or a freeze response. They're scared, but when you're not taking action, it's very disempowering. When you believe in something and then take action to help create it, you have hope. So that's the definition that was given to me that I love because hope is faith in action.
Yeah. On the spiritual side, it says faith without works is dead. I read that in the Bible. Faith without
You
your
can't.
actions
Well, and it,
is you know,
excuse me,
it's
it's so funny because you see so many people of faith praying and hoping or just thinking if they raise their vibe, something good is going to manifest or God's going to deliver them with whatever. Typically, divinity's always with us, but they're guiding us for the actions we can take. There's that saying that God helps those who help themselves. The guidance is there. We just need to trust it and lean in to create what it is we feel guided to create. But there has to be action.
yeah. I call them lazy Christians. You may be nicer, but I call them lazy because they just that's not how God works, and that's not what's in the Bible. And those are folks that don't read that because that's not how He works. So I call them lazy because they'll never get anywhere because they're moving contrary to what God has set up to do. And so one has to align, we call it alignment, with God to accomplish with His principles and so forth. That's how we get it, is that we align with His principles and do as He says within His principles, as guidelines, and we'll get it. As you're moving through and your first project, if you will, your first child, where that you give birth to your first book, you had mentioned on the onset that the environmental piece. I wanted to know, when did that come into you? When did it came into your being so strongly that it now has caused you to pivot? Because that's an impression that is deep within a being to make them move to that other piece. How did that enter in, and what was it that caused you to become more concerned about that?
That was 100% my divine guidance. I was I was led to live in an area where I would say it was environmentally sensitive. I was aware of the environment and how we should take care of it, but I was also very, very busy. And I was of the opinion, which I think most of the planet is, that, well, that's above my pay grade. I'm not a scientist. I'm not in politics. Those people are going to have to figure it out. And I trust that they will because I can't do anything. I'm just one person who is not a scientist or a politician. That was my ongoing narrative until my spiritual awakening. And when the idea for the book came through, it was very much it's a book about leadership and creation through our spiritual awareness in general, but very much highlighting the environmental crisis because it's the biggest one that we face. And to be fair, it is part of our instinctual programming. We will focus on the most immediate, what feels like the most pressing issues first, like wars or economic disasters. We will focus on that because if you feel like you can't, if you feel unsafe, you're going to focus on that before you think of, well, global warming is more of a distant threat. It's not that distant. We see the extreme weather events going on
Yeah.
now, but this came through very strongly as something we really need to highlight as an area we should be concerned about, and each and every one of us raising our voices. It goes so far beyond how are you voting? Are you actively engaged in your local governments? It's not just that, because quite often we think, well, what does that vote do? It's your voice and how you use it, and recognizing your leadership on a micro level. Each and every person, leadership's not titles. It's how we influence in our sphere, our families, our work groups, our communities, every place we show up. As you know, Ken, our energy affects other people
Hmm.
and our communication affects other people, the way
Still
we
energy.
communicate and show up. And so we have a lot of power there to communicate the things that we think are important, the areas that are a concern for us, to communicate and advocate for a better, I want to say a better world, but that seems like a little too much for most of us to take on. Start locally, start in your neighborhood. Just start to take action as you feel guided on anything that is compelling to you as an issue in your community. Maybe it's homelessness or food insecurities, whatever it is. And the environment issue is not going away until we take some really big global steps to fix it. But whatever it is, we all have influence and a positive impact that we can make. Really became clear to me. It's so interesting, Ken. Even though I had a leadership background most of my life, I was completely abdicating any responsibility for the environmental crisis or any
Hmm.
other, the governmental crises or anything else out of my, what I saw as my realm and scope. But each of us has a voice that we can use more, and ways in our communities that we can advocate for the changes that we feel, or the help we feel people need. Community building is just so important for the healing that our communities, our global family needs.
Yeah. We must become the change in our local community because the collective, as far as the higher ranking politicians, they're not interested in that. They're not looking at something as climate change as a human race. And I think until they look at it that way, I think then we'll be able to solve it. If we look at it as something that is affecting the human race, not just a party, because we're not focusing on that as a human race, because one party will come, they put policies in place, the next party will come, rip down all those policies, and they have this dance and not understanding as this dance is going on between this madness. We're having more hurricanes, we're having more floods, we're having more. There's a human crisis that
Yeah,
is happening amongst the globe. And so it is going to take the common individual to become the change. And as
that's
we
right.
are beginning to move and grow as a organism, if you will, and then it will begin to be noticed and affect. And that is how the changes will take place. Everything starts in the streets.
Yes.
They went into the streets. Everyone starts in the streets.
Yeah.
The women, before they were able to vote, they went on in the streets. Everyone went out in the streets. The church went out in the street. Martin Luther King, all the other people going in the streets, and that's how it is changed. So it's
Share
never
your
from those
voice.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we must
I think
become
it's
the change.
important to recognize too, in talking about the climate crisis, part of the reason individuals aren't getting involved is our human instinctual programming and fear of stepping out of our
Hmm.
comfort zones and denial, which is part of our
Hmm.
instincts. Maybe it'll go away, somebody else will figure it out. There's no guilt in that. It's how we're programmed. But when you recognize it, you can choose differently and really tune in to how you're feeling guided to make a difference. It's part of our instinctual programming to not want change and to not sign up for anything that would mean more money or inconvenience. Those are biggies. And when people talk about trying to solve the climate crisis, we all think, oh, it's going to cost more. It's going to be, I'm going to have to change something that I'm already doing. I don't like change. And the point that really needs to be driven home is that the change is upon us. The extreme weather conditions are upon us. They're affecting more and more people around the globe. And you want to talk about expense and inconvenience. Nobody is safe from it. It's
Hmm.
out there and it's going to become more prevalent and more extreme until we turn the tide.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight that. And it goes back into believing in ourselves
Hmm.
and that inner knowing or intuition, which starts with self-love, but knowing we can share our voice and make a difference.
Takes one to start, and then as we come together, we are pretty powerful. We just don't know it. So talk to me about that, as you told us where that genesis came from as to the environmental piece. How did it how did that move you towards creating this nonprofit, and how did that come together? What does the nonprofit do? You mentioned some of the things that you offer and so forth. So what does it do, and how can a listener in your area be a part of it?
So the nonprofit is online, so you don't have to be in my area. We're available globally. It has two
Hmm.
components, and this really came to me as guidance. I was just told you should do this. This is coming together nicely. We're going to take this idea that was originally a business and we're going to make it a nonprofit, give the proceeds to charity. So my books are written and set up so all the proceeds go to the Global Rising Tide. And as proceeds come in, we will just send it out to vetted nonprofits that are really working hard on climate change. But the donors, and that's anyone that has made any kind of a contribution, are invited into the donor community where I train and have resources on raising your frequency, manifesting, raising your consciousness. And I do live group calls on energy work. I'm an energy master. So diffusing the trapped emotions that can keep us down and keep our energy, our frequency down. Those are all of the things helping people find their purpose, because most of us are being called to step out in new ways. Since the planet's going through so much turbulence right now, we'll be
Hmm.
called forward to serve or expand in new ways. And so we work on that. All of the things that I've been called to do, we're doing in that donor community, with the proceeds going to help in climate warming.
So all of you guys, everyone that's been listening to our conversation, we're going to put together all of her Cynthia's links so that you can get into her space, the books, and I've been telling you guys about the books that you need to form book clubs. Each one of you guys buy the books, and then you sit down, you read, and you have potluck or whatever, and you get together one day and you discuss the chapter. What did you learn from there? What did you see? And so forth. And as you do that, that group is going to grow. They're going to see stuff. They're going to get deep into it, extract wonderful things. You guys are going to bond and you will grow together and become so effective. And I've been telling you guys this for many years now. Buy it instead of giving cheap, crazy gifts. Give books, Cynthia's books. Buy those books, hand it to people that you know would benefit from that, from her wisdom and her knowledge. To give these things out, and so that you can become effective, become that change. But she goes into much more than that. She talks about you, fall in love with you. Those of you that need leadership in your business, some of you may have some small businesses and so forth. Cynthia has wealth of information with leadership style and what you need to do and all these different things to navigate your businesses from where it's stuck. Here is a woman, guy, that has both of the sense and the knowledge in the business aspect, and also the sense and the knowledge in the spiritual aspect. This is someone you would want to take advantage of in the sense that you get her books, get into her space, dig and ask questions and grow and change the world. Cynthia, I have a question to ask you as we're closing up because I keep you here. It's almost an hour, I think, past an hour. You have a mic, and that mic is connected to us. I think there's now 8+ billion people on this planet. What would you say to us?
The best thing that you can do for yourself and humanity, your circle of influence, is to learn to recognize and then trust and take action on your inner knowing or your intuition. The number one best thing I can encourage everyone to do. And I do have a lot of free resources on my YouTube channel, and my website links to a lot of different free resources. That is the best thing I would encourage everyone to do. And then, the guidance will take you from there.
They say all the time, trust the process. And it's absolutely true. You would be amazed when you learn to do that. Surrender. There's an aspect of surrendering. And once one surrenders, you will be guided, especially by God, that invisible individual. Once you surrender, you'll be okay. It's good hands. Cynthia, I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment and allowing us access to you and to those vulnerable parts of you that you were able to show us. We want to thank you so much for coming and for sharing.
Ken, it's been a delightful conversation. I really appreciate your time and energy that you bring forward on all of your episodes. And I appreciate getting to know you today. Thanks for having me.
It is an honor to have you as a part of our family. Thank you so much. Cynthia, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.